What's up? You are now listening to Americanized, a storytelling podcast where you'll hear from eclectic first and second generation Americans share their stories and real life experiences as children of immigrants. Welcome back to another episode of Americanized. I'm your host, Rosin Claru, and in this episode, I sit and chat with Rudy Salo. Rudy Salo is a man of many identities, with one being a first-generation Arab American who grew up in Orange County, California in the era of the Gulf War. He shares his experience of living in this anti-Arab climate and his evolution of taking pride in his heritage as he grew up. Rudy also speaks on the significance of Arab American representation in the media as he grew up with quote-unquote no Arab American heroes. Stay tuned to hear his story. Thank you for being on the show. Rudy, could you share a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to come onto this show. I'm honored. I know we've been communicating for a couple of months about this opportunity, so I'm very excited. So I'm Rudy Salo, and I am many things. I guess for purposes of this show, why that might be relevant is, even though you probably can't tell from my name, and there's some interesting facts about that. Actually, my name is Rudy Salo. My father's name is Saliba, and Saliba means the cross in Arabic and in Aramaic. I'm actually an Arab American. I was born in downtown Los Angeles in May 1977, and my parents immigrated here from Jordan. My father came in the 60s. My mother came in the early 70s. And so I'm a first generation Arab American, and I came of age during the 1980s and the 1990s, which had profound impacts on me growing up during that time, which we'll talk about during the show. I'm a lawyer by day. I'm a partner in the law firm of Nixon Peabody, which actually is headquartered in Boston. And I've been a lawyer for 19 years now. I graduated from Georgetown in 2003. I work in the area of infrastructure finance. And so I talk incessantly about how important infrastructure is to our society and how complicated financing infrastructure is and what goes the ins and outs of that. I've been doing infrastructure finance now for 16 years of my career. So I've always worked with local government. And what does that actually mean? What does infrastructure finance mean? That means I actually work on roads, schools, colleges, bridges, hospitals, museums, sports stadiums throughout the entire country. I help work the financings of those. So pretty much most of the things that are not owned directly by a corporation are financed by some kind of government or nonprofit entity, and I work on those. So I get a lot out of my job. Like I feel like I give back to society, which is very, very important. I am also the vice president of the Arab American Lawyers of Southern California, which is a Arab American lawyer organization based out of Southern California. And I teach. I'm an adjunct professor at Chapman University. I teach the foundations of transactional law, that's what I do. When you do infrastructure finance, that means I'm not going to court. I'm actually just doing contracts and documents. And so I teach a course every spring to second-year law students about what's it really like to be a deal lawyer. I'm a podcaster. I'm a co-host of a podcast called Good Is in the Details, which was founded by a high school friend of mine. She's a philosophy professor at Cal Poly University here in California, and it's a philosophy and law podcast. Mostly philosophy, and actually, we talk a lot about social media and a lot of relevant topics and how to apply philosophy to live a better life. And there's some legal components to it. I'm also an actor, trying to be an actor. I mean, I've done a few roles here and there, and was recently in this one short film called Curtain Call, where I won an award for it. And gosh, what else? I write for Forbes.com. I'm a transportation correspondent, where I talk a lot about transportation and transit and infrastructure. And yeah, I'm I'm also a screenwriter. I've been writing screenplays now for a number of years. The first one that I ever wrote was a film called White Like Me, which was semi-autobiographical film about a kid coming of age in the 80s and 90s in Orange County, California, which, if you know anything about Orange County, California, if you've ever heard of Huntington Beach, there was a large skinhead contingent in the 1990s around the punk rock scene. And I was, around during that era and saw a lot of crazy things. It was good. It was a great time to come of age still, because some of the bands that you can go see for like $5 were like No Doubt and Sublime. And it was a wonderful time. The music was fantastic, but there was this white supremacist element that you always have to watch out for whenever you were at a punk rock show. I'm very passionate about punk rock. If it wasn't punk rock, I probably would have never become a lawyer. Really taught me how to think about politics and inequities, and it really shaped my life. So yeah, I'm sorry. I just kind of like went on I kind of rambled on there. I know there was a lot there to unpack, but that's who I am. There's a lot there, because I do feel like there's a lot to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely are a jack of all trades.
I'm also a father. I have two children, a 3.5-year-old and a 5-year-old. My wife's a surgeon. And so we have, this whole like lawyer doctor family as well. I often forget to mention that. And people always remind me, they're like, hey, you're also a dad. Don't forget that, your family. I'm like, oh my God, of course, my family's the most important thing. So just wanted to raise that. Sorry.
That's funny. Yeah. A lot going on in your life, it sounds like. And I'm interested how you connected punk rock with law.
It's actually not that unusual. There are a number of former punk rockers who like real superstars that either went into law or some kind of finance. Like, for example, there's this guy Joe Escalante from the Vandals, which was a big band here based in Orange County and Long Beach back in the 80s and 90s. He actually became a lawyer as well, and now he's in radio, and he's, I don't think he really practices law, but there is this element there's a political element to punk rock. If you go back and you listen to some of the bands that came out in the late 70s and the early 80s, in particular, Black Flag, Bad Brains, Dead Kennedys, huge influence on me. That there was this whole like political aspect of punk rock where they were the ones that would talk about, inequities, and they were, most of them were anti-Nazis, yet there was this Nazi white nationalist element to a whole other aspect of punk rock, and they would often battle together. And so, but they also talked a lot about the problems of war, the problems of being poor, race relations. I mean, it's pretty incredible how I don't know if I mentioned Bad Brains, but they're also a band that was critical. If you really listen to the early 80s punk rock, those political bands, and you're listening to what they're saying, it's great. Because if you're an angry 16-year-old kid, which quite honestly I was, and there's a whole bunch of reasons behind that, punk rock basically said, hey, it's okay to be angry. If you're angry about the right things, if you're angry about people mistreating you or people mistreating others because of their race or because of their sexuality or because of that stuff, that's okay to be angry, and it's okay to fight back about that. And that was kind of what I kind of got out of punk rock. It kind of soothed me to be like, okay, it's okay that I'm bothered by the fact that I had this kind of rougher upbringing, growing up Arab American in the 1980s and the 1990s, because back then you turn on the news and it was just anything having to do with being an Arab was terrorism, hijacking this, hijacking that. There were no Arab American heroes in the 1980s and the 1990s. I mean, hell, even into the 2000s. I mean, you have the 9/11. It's only recently within like the last couple of years where you're finally starting to see people like Rami Youssef have his show, and Rami Malek winning the best Oscar, and you're really starting to see these Arab Americans, coming up and like trying to show the world that, hey, like we're normal people too. I didn't have that growing up, and there weren't a lot of other Arab Americans other than family members around me. So it wasn't like I can really relate to any of them and talk to them about it. So I always kind of grew up around, it was really close to people of other races, Asian Americans. I've got Asian Americans in my family. I have Latinos in my family. And you just kind of felt like a kinship because they kind of, felt that they were the other as well. And so punk rock just taught me how to think about the law and about the state of the world and what kind of an impact I want to have on that. And if it wasn't for it, I really don't think I'd be where I'm at today.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Because in those songs, I imagine they would speak truth, and then it's something you could relate to, and then figure out what you want to do about what you now know and how you relate to that with your personal experiences and how to make an impact on the world or locally, like through law. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. Definitely made me want to work in an area of the law that would have an impact, a positive impact on as many people as humanly possible. And quite honestly, like that's what infrastructure finance is all about. You need roads to get to work. You need schools to teach people. You need hospitals to fix the sick people. You need bridges. You need tunnels. You need airports. You need universities. You need sports stadiums. You need all of these things to have like an enriched environment for society and for people to, come together. And that's what we do. I help build that stuff. I help solve the problems. I help figure out, the complicated, because governments are constrained in the way that they can borrow. They're not like corporations. So you have to like really know the law, and you also really need to know finance, and you really need to know just so many different areas of it. But at the end of the day, the end result of what you're building, or if you're saving money for the government, it really has an impact on society. So I feel great about what I do. And if there's any listeners out there that are thinking about pursuing a career in law, but they want, to have a positive impact on people and make a good living at the same time, I highly recommend doing something in infrastructure finance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's brilliant. That makes me think of my friend. She's studying pre-law and she's also first generation. And like, I don't know what direction she's going to go in, but I'll have to tell her about infrastructure law. I'm sure she knows about it, but I didn't know the details of it. So I applaud you for that. You're like making an impact on the world.
And it's interesting too. There's an element of my upbringing that had a major impact on besides punk rock. There's an element of my upbringing that led me into infrastructure and being passionate about transportation. Mm-hmm. My grandmother immigrated here in the early 1970s after my parents came here. She didn't have a driver's license where in Jordan. A lot of back then, a lot of women didn't drive. They didn't need to. Small little areas. All the families used to live in apartment buildings, and the church was nearby, and they would just rely upon people to get around. So when she immigrated here, she didn't get a driver's license. She was old. She was too old, and she didn't know English. She learned English by watching The Price is Right and The Young and the Restless. So I pretty much grew up watching The Price is Right and The Young and the Restless. Right. But what she did do was she taught herself how to get around on a bus. And this is in Orange County, which, is not that great of an area for public transportation. But she always instilled in me, because she lived with us and she practically raised me and my sister. She always instilled in my sister and me, you don't need a car. You can get around by using public transportation. Here, let me show you. Here's the bus schedule. Here, watch, look where we can go. And it was amazing. We went all over the place by using a bus. And she taught me how to use a bus. And then I grew up taking the bus down to Huntington Beach, which, to go to the beach and do all of those activities that I was doing. And that had a huge impact on me. Huge impact on me. And I talk a lot about that in my Forbes.com articles about how car dependency is a major problem here in the United States. It affects our climate. It affects the way that our cities are laid out, the suburbs versus urban environments. And we really need to get away from car dependency. So it's just kind of interesting that my grandmother growing up in this Arab country without a driver's license comes here, learns public transportation, which she didn't even have in Jordan. And she instills that into me. And that has had a major impact on my life. So it's just interesting as well.
Wow, that is amazing. And it makes me think of my dad's mindset. He's very pro car. He's like, you have to get a car in this country. Everybody has to drive. Everybody has a car in this country. So he's like really like pushing that onto my sister, who's like, she has no interest in driving at all for safety reasons.
Sure.
And I was telling you earlier about, I was in Ivory Coast and public transportation. I feel weird saying public transportation, but it's these vans that are made out to carry people and I guess it is public transportation, but thinking about public transportation here and there, it's really different. But it's really rare for people to drive and like own their cars and drive around. It's like you have to be really wealthy to do that. So taxis are everywhere. There's buses. There's what we call a baka. It's like a minivan that just transport people to different stops, and that's like the main transportation over there. And I guess in America, everyone has a car. That's what my dad sees, and that's what my dad wants for everyone.
Do you think that kind of an environment makes people closer in the Ivory Coast? Like there's more of a community because people are they're traveling together, right? I mean, and it's okay. Put aside the uber elite that own their cars and that are only using their cars to get around, but everybody else, like, do you feel like that has a positive impact on the togetherness, the feeling that people they're closer to each other?
Mm-hmm. I think it does. That's a good point. That's a good question. I think it does because I guess even as like a visitor going there, like you're more immersed in the culture and you're immersed with the people who are sitting next to strangers who are of the same background as you. And even though you don't talk to them, I think it's cool. Like you're not in your own car driving, you're not like independent or by yourself. You're interacting with people, sharing the language. I think it does form more of a community, even like talking to the taxi driver and making those connections with people. So I think I would say so.
Yeah, when I was in law school, I went to law school in DC and didn't have a car when I was in DC, used public transportation, would walk everywhere or take taxis. And in my first legal job, Georgetown had this program where they would send their first year students like overseas. And I got a job in Mexico City, and it was fantastic. Where I lived was several miles away from the law firm that I worked at, and I would have to take the two major streets in Mexico City. It's Insurgentes, and I forgot the other one. I think it's Revolucion. I think. And so I would take two buses every single day. I mean, it was funny because the buses, some of the buses were these little minivans, and I was extremely tall, and like the back of my head would like touch some of the minivan because it was like standing room only. But I was immersed, and my Spanish was fantastic back then because I was using the bus going to and from work. And my Spanish is terrible now. I mean, it's very, very basic. I mean, back then it was like perfect. Mm-hmm. And that was because that whole summer I was using the bus to get around. I was with everybody. It was great. It truly is being immersed in people. The car, it does separate you from everybody else. Don't get me wrong. Cars, especially the way that our cities are laid out now, in particular on the West Coast versus places in the East Coast, you do need to have a car. Like I'm not sitting here saying I don't have a car. I definitely have a car. I mean, I got two little kids. It's very difficult to have two little kids and not have a car.
Right. And what you said about interacting with when you were in Mexico City, I remember when I had to take the public transportation in Ivory Coast by myself, and my French isn't the best either. So I was really nervous about telling them like where we're going or where to get off. But somehow I managed to do it without them questioning where I'm from or like what accent I have. So it's cool. It's like a learning experience, and you get to really know the country that you're in and the people.
100%. It's the only way to do it. If you're going to go to a country and if you really want to learn a foreign language, do not drive a car. True. Just don't. So long as you feel safe using whatever the transportation is and you've figured the safest way around it, right? That's the way to learn language, is to just get on the bus.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. It's really true. So you said you were born in LA and you were there in like the 80s, 90s.
Yeah, I was born in downtown LA and then Orange County, which is this, if you know anything about Southern California, like it's just this is a very interesting small pocket of area. Used to be called living behind the orange curtain because used to be this hardcore Republican oasis. I'm not dinging Republicans or Democrats. I'm just saying it just had this very hardcore conservative reputation, especially back then. It's not so much like that anymore. So they used to call it living behind the orange curtain because it was just this strange place to kind of versus Los Angeles. It was just so much. It used to be so different than Los Angeles. It is like these suburbs. Like when you think of suburbs, like in a movie, like that's what Orange County was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm over here in the East Coast. I don't know how to picture, like, what were the demographics like growing up in LA? or Southern
Good
Ireland?
question. Primarily white.
Great.
A very, 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 very white. Very white. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not putting down anything. I'm just, growing up, everybody was white.
Right.
Now it's a lot more diverse. Could it be more diverse? Absolutely. It could be, it should be more diverse, but it's a lot different now than when it was 40 years ago, when I was like a baby. I mean, if you go and you look at some of the historical background into Orange County, when you ever hear the terms white flight, Orange County is one of those places. That's where people had left the urban areas and went and built these suburbs with these big tract homes, and they're away from everybody, and everybody has a car because the public transportation sucks, or there isn't any public transportation, and you kind of live in these little boxes, which had a very interesting impact. And that's one of the reasons why Orange County was one of the centers of punk rock in the late 70s, early 80s, and the early 1990s. It was because it was a bunch of bored teenagers sick of the suburban lifestyle, and their non-interaction with people were just pissed off. And they were like, I don't want to live in these boxy places and be separated from people. I want to be around people and be in these intimate clubs and listen to some music and be pissed off. And so that also had an impact on punk rock and the punk rock bands that came out of Orange County, which were some of the greatest ones ever. These days, there's a number of Middle Eastern people living in Orange County now, Asian Americans, Latinos. The African American population is finally getting some numbers underneath them there. But when I was growing up, it was primarily white.
Wow. So I'm just connecting these dots, how teenagers in the suburbs, punk rock law, and how it sounds like you actually could relate to them, even though you weren't a white person in the suburbs. So can you tell me about what were you angry about? What were you facing what was your upbringing like?
My upbringing was interesting. My first language was Arabic. Okay. And then at some point, and my mom tells me I used to speak Arabic very well. At some point I said, I just stopped. I was like, no Arabic, no more, as a child. And I actually specifically remember telling my parents that they are not allowed to speak Arabic in public. And that was during the Gulf War, August 1990 to 1991, because I was scared. I was really scared. It was very scary being an Arab at that time. Because it was back then, you used to you drive around your car, and there used to be bumper stickers on cars with a bullseye, with an Arab person on a camel. And it would say, I'm going to smoke me some camels, and it was just this, America hadn't been in a war in a long time. The last war that they were in was in Vietnam, and it was terrible. Like, people were bloodthirsty. They wanted to kill some Arabs. And so I started telling my parents, you're not allowed to speak Arabic in public. And of course I felt guilty about that for the rest of my life. I mean, it's just one of those things, but I was 13 years old. What was I? I was a scared kid. Here I am as a child, I'm growing. Some of the earliest memories that I have are of the Civil War in Lebanon, and just whenever hearing the word Arab, it was always terrorist. So, you could interchange the two there. And, my parents are speaking Arabic. I used to speak Arabic. And so I would equate, my upbringing with terrorism, because that's all what I would see on television. And that's all that I would read about on the magazines. There were, like I said, there were no heroes. There were no good Arabs. It was just all bad. And that has a major, major impact on you. So I tried to make myself look as white as humanly possible. I just did. I mean, I wanted to fit in and not be bothered. And I used to, it was just funny. I used to be like really dark when I was like a kid, and somehow like my skin kind of lightened up as I got older. And I used to have a lot of breathing problems, deviated septums and everything. I actually wound up getting a nose surgery in when I was in high school because I needed it, and they wound up making my nose look a little less ethnic. Right, and I just kind of blended right in, and that was fine. It was just easy. It was just easier to look and live white than otherwise. And my parents specifically named me Rudy. We didn't have Arabic names because my parents had faced some discrimination, and so they didn't want us to grow up with that. our last name used to be my dad's middle name, which is Saliba. Many hundreds of years ago, our last name used to be Saliba. Somehow it became Salo. Salo sounds Italian or Spanish.
Right.
So I was able to just kind of fit right in. And that is both good and bad, because sometimes when people think that you're white, you hear things. You do hear some racist, not from my friends. None of my friends growing up were racist in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes if you're riding in a taxi or if you're around other people, you hear things that like maybe you wouldn't hear if they thought that you weren't white, you know? And so in a way, it's like, wow, I really do have or seen or experienced what real racism is, because I've been, quote unquote, on the other side and like seen and heard what people really think. And it's terrible.
Yeah, that's a scary thing, because then it's like there's no filter. You're there. The truth is out. And it's like, wow, this is what they really, it's scary. But it's
100%.
Yeah, like you said, it's good and bad. Like now you know, but it's like you wish you didn't know.
That's correct.
Yeah. So you like really just naturally fit in with your white peers, and white people are passing as white pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, look at my name. I'm a Christian. I don't speak with any accents. I was born here. I mean, I love punk rock. I love science fiction. I mean, I'm a nerd. I love horror films. I love heavy. Growing up, I loved heavy metal. I was just like everybody else, and that was fine. Like I said, all my friends knew what I was. They didn't care, and it was just being around the other elements and hearing. I've seen and heard some things that. I'm not sure it was good for me to hear, or if it was good for me, because I can attest to like, oh yeah, no, there's some really racist people out there. Like their true feelings are, racist, because they felt comfortable enough when they thought they were just around their people to say things that they really shouldn't have.
Wow, exactly. It's a weird balance. I want to say it's a positive, not that they said that, but to know that it's confirmed people are racist. It's not like a made up thing.
Not everybody. In fact, most people are the vast majority of people are fantastic. Right. They just are. Like I am somebody that still believes in people are good until trust people until there's a reason not to. Mm-hmm. And that's gotten me into trouble in the past, but that's my default. But yeah, there are some bad people out there, and you just got to be careful.
Right, exactly. How did these stereotypes or things you've heard surrounding Arab Americans or Arabs in general impact the way you perceive yourself, and how was that? Like, how did you now see yourself?
Now or growing up?
Both, like growing up, and then we can talk about now as well.
Yeah, growing up, I hated it. I hated being an Arab American. I just wanted to be a white kid, like I said, the Gulf War, the 80s, it was terrible. Every movie that had any kind of an Arab in it was always a terrorist. And then the Gulf War happened. It got to the point where I just started lying to people and just saying I was Italian. I'm like, why not? I was clearly a weak kid. I felt like lying would make my life easier. I didn't have the confidence in myself because of all of this negativity. So I was like, well, I got to get through life. And so sometimes I would lie and say I was Italian. I get to college, and once I get to college and I'm able to really learn history and really learn about the Middle East and really learn about, what was going on in the world, and like peeling back the onions, the pieces of the onion, and getting deep involved into Middle Eastern international relations and truly educating myself. I mean, I flipped. And then I was very proud of my Arab American heritage. And I started taking Arabic classes, and I, after law school, I went and traveled to the Middle East and was very proud of it. It's not, it's not a perfect place. And there's always been problems there, and there always will be some problems there. But the rest of the world's got their problems too. I'm actually kind of hopeful, to be honest with you, about the future of it. I mean, if you learn history and you really go back and you learn about the crazy, terrible things that happened in Europe, and the murders, the Inquisition and the way that they've treated the Jews in the past, and all these terrible, terrible things that they've done. There's some problems in the Middle East, and they're going through some some terrible times right now, but you have to be hopeful for, okay, every society, every culture goes through this. Eventually they'll get through this and things will, won't be as bad, if you know what I mean. So learning history, it taught me to be hopeful for the future of the Middle East and to kind of be proud and accepting of who I am.
Well, the way, like, just hearing you say all those things made me think of how similar the first generation and second generation, the kinship and that experience of the shame we have early on, either wanting to be white, lying about our background. It sounds just so familiar, and it makes me really like sad. But it's like, dang, it's everybody. Like, it's all of us.
It is. I swear to you, that movie that I wrote, which almost got made, and there was a whole bunch of issues. It's called White Like Me. That's it. That's the whole premise of it. It's about being a first generation immigrant, wanting to just fit in and like not bother with being the other, right? And then of course, the spoiler alert: the character eventually is proud of being the other. Yeah, I do. Of course, that happened in the script. I mean, Jesus, it should happen. But that's what I spent years writing on that and working it. I'm still proud of it. I have no idea what will ever happen with it, but I'm like, I couldn't be more proud that I wrote a movie that a producer actually wanted, and we even had a director and possible investor, and it just didn't work out. COVID. But I still believe in that story very, very. Yes, it's based upon my life, but it's not just based upon my life, because I took elements of my friends that I grew up with that were African American and wrote that into this. In fact, I had one of my African American friends give me a couple of tidbits on, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. Asian Americans, even some of my white friends. I mean, they had a direct influence on me for that. And one of my friends who was a homosexual that came out in high school, that's touched upon in there as well. All of these things are in there, and hopefully someday that something will turn out from it. I have high hopes that's like, hearing what you just said, I was like, oh, you could totally relate to this movie. Like anybody who's a first generation or second generation American would be like, hey, this is the movie about us. Absolutely. This dude wrote this movie kind of about his life, but he was thinking about us when he wrote this. And I was, because that story, that unique little immigrant feeling that you had when I was talking, we all have that. Mm-hmm. Every single one of us has that. And those stories need to be out there. Those unique stories should be out there, in my opinion. There's not enough of that today. And I love what I do. I really do. I mean, like I said, I think it's very impactful, but I do want to do more. That's why I do the acting. That's why I do the writing, because our stories need to be out there. And it may take decades to get them out there, but I'm going to work my butt off to make sure that they're out there, and that's why podcasts like this are fantastic. And, it's so great that you have something like this for people like me to put our voice out there. So I'm really passionate about this stuff, and I'm passionate not just for me, but it's for anybody that's a first or second generation American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's like a lot of pride in that, even though we all have the experience of not being prideful. And I'm trying to put these stories out there because my roommate was also first generation. And I was like, wow, we have similar experiences. This must be true for a lot of people. So I just wanted to, I don't know. You have these stories, you have these experiences, you have these people, and we all share this thing. What do we do about it? And how do we, like, what is going to come out of it? We don't know, but just hearing these things and relating to each other, as different as we are really similar in a lot of ways.
100%. I couldn't agree more. That's why whenever I meet anybody that is that could relate to the first generation story, it's like, I already have 1 million things in common with this person. Right. Like, let's see if let's find out all the things that we have in common. It's great. I loved hearing that about your dad, trying to get your sister about the car and like how important the car is. And now you can go back to your dad and say, Dad, you should really listen to this podcast episode with this guy that I was just talking to, who, he thinks that it's important that we learn not to rely upon the car. So it's just cool. It's funny to hear these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to connect.
It is.
But you did mention a lot about growing up in the 80s and 90s, and I'm not familiar with that because I was born in the late 90s. So as far as the stereotypes are things that what I know about terrorism and those stereotypes and brainwashing and propaganda. It's all post 9/11 for me. So for you, being on both ends, like how was that post 9/11?
Great question. First of all, growing up in the 80s I'm going to put aside the fact that I was an Arab American. If you weren't an Arab American, growing up in the 80s was pretty awesome. Like the music was awesome. The movies were awesome. There was only one, enemy per se. It was Russia, and Reagan was going to, stop them because they were the evil empire. And it's just like things made sense. They were a little bit simpler, especially if you were white. Oh my God. If you were white in the 80s, oh man,
living the life.
Whoa, what a great, here I was wanting to be white, growing up in Orange County. I kind of got a taste of it. It was great. I still only pretty much listen to 80s and 90s. 9/11 was, it's so funny because right when you get into the 90s, it's the Gulf War. And then, that sucked for a very, very long time. And then towards the late 90s, Al Qaeda starts to come around, and because they bombed Tanzania and other parts of the world, and then the true the Soviet Union falls, and then our next enemy are these international terrorist groups after Iraq falls and everything. So it just became weird. Like it became really weird into the 1990s because terrorism it wasn't like it was made up. Like there is terrorism. Like it's just whether or not how you associate yourself with that, right? Like you don't want everybody to automatically assume just because when you say you're Arab that they think that they're scared of you. But I've seen it. When I've told people I'm Arab, I've seen like a little thing in their eye. That's what used to happen in the 80s and 90s.
Wow.
And then 9/11 happened. I was actually in DC. I actually was there. I had to escape out of the city because that other plane that eventually went down in Pennsylvania was still out there because it was heading towards the Capitol. So we had to got on the subway, got out of the city. It was very, very scary. Okay, so that was a very scary time. And then there was the next Iraq War, but something started to change. And I think it was because of the internet and then social media. For the vast majority of people, it just stopped being okay to associate Arabs with terrorists. And I still remember, in 2005, 2006, hearing hearing the racist things, hearing the anti-Arabic things that started to dissipate in the late 2000s, 2010. And maybe that started to dissipate because I started identifying as it. I no longer lied about being white. Right. I was just like, no, I'm an Arab. So it's strange. Like I stopped hearing bad things when I started identifying and being prouder of my Arab American heritage. Do I still think there's some racist people out there? Absolutely. Of course there is. But I don't want to associate with them. Fine. I don't want to be around them anymore. But these days with the likes of, Rami Youssef and Rami Malek and all these Arab Americans coming up and being great artists and giving a different voice. It's awesome. It's way better. And I've talked to second generation Arab Americans that like you that were born in the late 1990s, barely remember 9/11. And they do feel the otherness, but they're just like, they don't feel it as the way I do because of the 19 in the 80s. It's just tons of movies with terrorists there, and forget about that. Just whenever you would turn on TV, you'd hear about these hijacking. Terrible things that were happening, like legitimately happening. Not in the movies, it was all it was just a lot of negative portrayals, but there were some horrible things that were happening. And as a child, when you're hearing your parents speak the language of these same people that you're always seeing on TV that are dressed up as terrorists, it's very hard with our young, not very bright brains to separate the two. Right. It takes a long time to learn how to do that.
Oh, it's making me think, and I wonder what that switch was in you said early, mid or 2000s, early 2000s. Once you were more proud of your heritage, and then you stopped hearing negative things.
And you know what else happened? It was fascinating. I remember being a kid and everybody making fun of the Arabic food that I would bring to school. I'd bring hummus, I would bring za'atar, I would bring all this stuff, and people would say, "Oh, you're eating bird seeds and blah blah blah." Everywhere you look now, you can go to any restaurant and there's hummus and za'atar. Arabic food is everywhere, and so that's a part of the switch. It's this. oh my God, I love Arabic food. Oh my God, I love Mediterranean food. Oh gosh, this Arab comedian is so funny, or oh, that actor is so great. That's why it's important to have, more Middle Easterners just be a part of everyday society, so people so the fear can drop. Yeah. And once they start liking things like your food, it's huge. That dissipates the fear and just kind of gets people to kind of tone down the negativity towards you. So there was this, I think I think starting in the late 2000s, you just started seeing Arabic food everywhere.
You're right.
I think that I really do. Kebab restaurants and falafel everywhere. I mean, it's fantastic. It's a great thing. But when I was growing up, you couldn't find that stuff, unless your mother or your grandmother made it for you. That was it. You couldn't find it anywhere. Now you can find it anywhere you want.
Wow.
And I do think that the food component to it is huge. I do. I think food has a huge impact on people's impression of other people.
Oh, absolutely. I love Mediterranean food. I do.
That's the greatest food on earth. That's why. Period. So I will argue that. I'm proud of that 100%. It is the greatest food on earth.
And I feel it's very healthy too.
It is.
I love Ivorian food, but I might agree with you on that one. I might have to.
I haven't had Ivorian food. I'd love to try some. I'm going to try to find an Ivorian restaurant in Southern California, and I will go there and I'll let you know what I think about it. But Mediterranean food is still the best, period.
Okay. But if you do find an Ivorian, just let me know. There's none anywhere.
I will.
Okay.
I'd be happy to. Yeah. I haven't had a lot of food from Africa. I've eaten Ethiopian. I mean, I think everybody's eaten Ethiopian food before. It's completely on another side of the continent. And I'm trying to think if I've never even been to like a South African restaurant before. Yeah. What I'm just curious. What is the most well-known dish or thing about in Ivorian cuisine?
Our main thing, like specific to Ivory Coast, is acheke, which is like ground cassava. So it looks like couscous, but it's cassava, and that with like grilled fish, grilled chicken, fried.
My mouth is watering. Yeah. It's like noon lunchtime here, and it's making me hungry.
Right. Yeah, but there's West African restaurants, but there's no. I feel like they're never specific enough.
Okay.
It's always like a blend. So I don't know. I've never found an Ivorian restaurant.
So I should find a West African restaurant. That's where I should go. And I should try to see if I could find something specific to the Ivory Coast on that menu.
Yeah. But acheke, I don't know. I don't think they serve them in restaurants. It'll be hard to find. Like, I can only get it at home if my mom finds a guy who sells it and then she makes it. So
that's great. That's fantastic.
Challenge.
It is. But isn't food from a different part of the world just the best?
Yeah.
Isn't it just a great thing to talk about?
It honestly could go on and on about food.
I mean, who hates food, right?
We all eat it. We all need it.
I try not to talk about things I try to avoid talking about politics. I actually try to avoid mostly talking about race or the religion or any types of stuff like that on our podcast on Good as in the Deed. We do talk a lot about those things, but we always try to take a very middle ground. We try not to overly express our opinions.
Right.
The things that I do try to talk about kind of incessantly are things that everyone in the world hates. Traffic. Like who in the world likes traffic? Nobody likes traffic. So I'm like, okay, well, I could talk about that a lot and not anger anybody on this side or on that side. And then there's food, right? Everybody likes food. Like who wouldn't want to try some good food from a different part of the world? Everybody is willing to do that because food's just important. If you could find those little middle grounds with people, I think it's huge. I think that's the easiest, best way to bring two sides to a table is to start with some food, in my opinion.
You're right, especially if they're two different cultures trying a completely different culture's food as well.
Absolutely,
it's a new experience for both of them.
100%.
You're right, but there are people out there who don't like trying new foods.
There are, and that'll tell you some things about those people. They're probably the same type of people that don't like to travel. They're probably the same type of people that don't like to experience different cultures. They're probably the same type of people that are very narrow-minded. So that'll tell you something, in my opinion.
You're right. And then already, if you know that, then it's like maybe we can not be friends or something.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being acquaintances with those people.
Right, exactly. You mentioned traveling. Have you been to Jordan before?
Yeah, 3 times.
Oh, wow. And the majority of your family is over there?
Majority of my family has left and come over here.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I have an uncle that's trying to come over here right now.
Mhm.
He's trying to sell his house, and we're trying to help him, settle over here in the United States. And his sons are already here. I mean, it's a bad situation over there. It's very, very bad.
Right.
But it wasn't always like that. When I was visiting in the mid 2000s, I went in 2005, 2008, and 2012. It was great. I loved it. I went to Jordan. I also went to Qatar. I've been to Jordan, Qatar, and Lebanon.
Oh, there's a huge Lebanese presence in Ivory Coast.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's way more Lebanese people scattered throughout the world than there is in actual Lebanon itself. And that's a bad situation there as well. I do still have some family in Lebanon too. Because my mom's family is actually, well, she was born in Jordan. They're actually originally from Lebanon. So there's a fair amount of Lebanese relatives that I have.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully your uncle can come over.
We're trying our best. We're doing everything that we can do.
Yeah, that'll be good. And honestly, I was doing a little research to prepare for this interview, and I didn't know. I don't know. This just went over my head. Arab American Heritage Month.
Yeah, it's in April. In fact, it's. I don't know how official it is. I know in California, I think we passed the resolution like 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow.
For Arab American Month happening in April. And I think at the State Department or even at the federal level, they do recognize it. So yeah, we do it. We have a month, which is pretty cool. So every month in April, I usually pump out an article about it and what it actually means to me. And I kind of tie, the story that I've kind of laid out here about the shame I had growing up. And now look at all these things there are to be proud of. And that month means a lot. It really does.
Yeah. I don't think that was ever shared in schools or in any.
I think it's a relatively new thing. I do.
Thing?
I really think it's a thing that's started to get its legs underneath it in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years.
Oh, wow.
I'm not surprised that you didn't learn about it growing up, because I didn't either. I mean, right. I only really heard about it in 2018.
Oh, okay. So I'm okay.
Yeah. So you're fine.
Okay. I was like,
I'm not, as an Arab American, I'm not offended. You're totally fine.
Sounds good. Oh yeah, I was thinking of how you said in the 2000s you weren't hearing as many bad things about Arab Americans. I wonder if that's related to there's always a target. There's always an other being targeted. So maybe there's an uprising in another group, and then potentially.
I heard things between I definitely after 9/11 until about 2005, 2006. I heard horrible things.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in taxis, and people were thinking I was white. The things that I had heard were absolutely awful. I feel like it was starting in the late 2000s shockingly with the rise of social media and the food, really getting into the culture. I think I started to hear less negative things, but at the same time, that was also the time when I was I don't know, coming out of the Arab closet more and was just no, I'm an Arab. That's what I am. I'm Arab American, forget it. I'm not, this is who I am. I'm not lying about this anymore. And that could also be another reason why I don't hear a lot of negative things either. But there's also, more Arab Americans on TV, more Arab Americans in movies. And so that definitely started to happen in the late 2000s. I definitely think so.
Were you able to form a community with friends who looked like you and people as you got older?
Yes. In fact, with the Arab American Lawyers Association, I definitely have. We are a pretty tight-knit group here in Southern California. That's why I'm proud to be a vice president of the organization. We definitely have a tight group. We try to help each other out 100%. And it's fascinating because it's we don't just have Arab Americans as a part of the organization. We have other people as well, and people of all religions being a part of our our network and our events. So it's really great. It's really open network of an association. So yeah, it's worked out very well. I feel like we've found common cause in being attorneys. We do want to have positive impacts on society, and we want people to view us more positive, and that's why I'm very proud to be a part of that organization.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And you're the vice president, so that's really cool. You have power in that.
Yeah, power. It's mostly just like, oh well, how much more things can I take on at this particular time? But I do agree that our mission is.
That's awesome. Well, you did mention you have kids. I wonder what messages, or as far as like identity and ethnicity and heritage and pride in that, how do you associate that with your kids, or what are you like teaching them?
My kids just look like white kids, because my wife is she's part Russian Ukrainian, and then the other part is Swiss Irish. So my kids are, they're half Arabic and then half white, and but they look white. They look even whiter than I do. But my mother speaks to them in Arabic, and so they know a couple of words, and they're familiar with the food, and at some point in the future, I'll probably teach them the history, and God willing, someday it'll be safe enough to take them over to Jordan or some of the other countries and show them where my side of the family came from. But no, they will know that they are Arabic growing up 100%. I can already see that they're not going to see the same negative things that I saw when I turned on the news or turned everything on TV. Things have changed. Right. They just have, and they've changed for the better. And so I think my kids are going to benefit.
Absolutely. I feel like nowadays people are more open-minded, or at least more aware of things.
100%. I mean, big believer in diversity and inclusion. My law firm is big on that. We're probably one of the first law firms in the world to have a dedicated diversity officer. And so it's fantastic. It's just better these days. If you're quote unquote different, whatever that means anymore,
right,
it's okay. Like it's way better to be what would be different in the 80s and 90s. It's way better to be different today than it was back then. That is the message I will tell to anybody that's out there. Is there a lot of room for improvement? Absolutely. Are there still a lot of problems and racism? 100%. Don't get me wrong, but it's better.
Absolutely. I guess that answers the last question. Like, what are you leaving the listeners with? What is your message to put out there?
I would say, for the listeners, there are people out there like me and like you that our stories are important and they will be told. And whether it's my story or somebody else's story, these are great stories. These are really interesting stories. And there are more people out there that are others than non-others these days. And we're allies. It doesn't matter if I'm Arab American or if you're African American or if you're this or you're that. We're all allies, and we need to help each other out, and we need to get our stories out there, and we need to talk to each other. And then you tell me your story, and then I can go tell somebody else your story, and et cetera, and spread this out there. That'll just make the world a better place. So what I would tell listeners is keep listening to other people's stories.
I love that. There's such power in storytelling and sharing your story. And that's how we communicate, sharing stories and learning from the 100% message. Yeah,
100%. And if people want more, if people like me or the message that I have, go check out Good Is in the Details podcast. We talk a lot about this stuff and other interesting things. Talk about philosophy, law. We put out shows twice a month. It's a great show. If what I'm saying sounds interesting, I hope your listeners take a listen to a couple of episodes.
Oh, absolutely. Check out Good Is in the Details podcast, and I'll put your socials out there.
Please do.
So on Instagram, you can follow Rudy at RudySS77. Oh, that's your birth year.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just connected that.
It's my name. It's my middle initial and the initial of my last name, and then my birth year.
Right, Rudy SS77. Okay, and on Twitter, Salo Rudy, SALORUDY.
Correct.
All right.
And if anybody out there wants to read anything that I've written on Forbes, all they would just type in is Rudy Salo Forbes, and then a whole bunch of articles will pop up.
Right, I did do that. I saw a bunch of things on transportation, and now I know why. So,
That's why.
right, infrastructure. Perfect.
Big thank you for this.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for putting the work into this. It's these stories are important. Your story is important. Our stories are important.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for reaching out and for being on and for putting your story out there. It was great to hear from you. Great to hear your side, your story, and your experiences.
It's an honor. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's still it's still early for you. I'm like,
it is. It's lunchtime. I wish I could find a West African restaurant around me, but I'll probably just eat some ramen downstairs in my work from home office.
Oh boy, enjoy your ramen and let me know.
I will. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Hope to catch you in the next episode. Be sure to follow Americanize on Instagram. All original music was produced by Stubborn Saul. Be sure to check him out on all music listening platforms at STBRNSAL. Peace out.